Christina Giardinelli. Christina Giardinelli. Christina Giardinelli. I'm here at Jackson County Parks and Recreation headquarters. As you can see behind me, this is where they keep their plows and their sanders. They have about 30 plows on hand and 16 sanders to keep those roads maintained. You mentioned city leaders here telling me that while they do have partnerships with the county and with ODOT, it is up to them to keep some of their neighborhood roads clear. The dispatch calls that you mentioned, those came in just after 4 p.m. Now, the information I've been able to confirm with fire officials so far is that this trailer here, this vendor trailer that you see behind me, that is actually where a small fire started. Now, I'm told the main issue with this fire was the smoke. It's closing down the stores. It forced people to evacuate, and the fire officials tell me it's still going to be a while before that store can open up again. We're still here in East Medford. As you can see, it's been snowing since about 5 p.m. The roads are getting a little icy, a little snow covered here, but the plows have been going through.
We go back out to News 10's Christina Giardinelli with more on the potentially dangerous conditions on the road.
Yeah, Carmine, it's raining now in Medford. It has been raining intermittently. And then, of course, with that snowpack that we saw last week now melting onto our roads, you can start to see those roads get real slick. Medford neighborhood, you can see still snow on the ground. It actually just started snowing a little bit, some flurries here and there. But as we're covering this weather event, this winter storm, we're also checking in with those who are perhaps bearing the biggest brunt of this storm, those who are unsheltered. About 30 minutes ago, we got a statement from the city saying that warming shelter that you just heard about had about 34 people staying in it the night that Barbosa was found. Now, it's unclear whether or not that it was at capacity at that time or if they had turned anyone away. I've been texting back and forth with the city manager, and she says that the fire department said that about 25 people would be considered at capacity, but that night they were taking more people just because the need was so high. This is Talent Central Business District, where the city hopes to accommodate more structures like this that have both a commercial aspect and residential units. The million-dollar question? How to get developers to buy into the idea of affordability. It was exactly 3 weeks ago today, around this same time of day, when Valerie said she first saw the smoke from the bootleg fire just on the other side of that forest. The very next day, she could already see flames coming up through and knew that she had to get her livestock out. I am here at the Ashland Community Hospital, where nurses are getting ready in just about a half an hour to do their shift change, and Dasha Dolan is getting ready to meet them here in the parking lot. As you mentioned, she's a local florist, and she found a way during the pandemic to use those skills to give back. 26-year-old Aurelio Escobar was arrested here on the corner of Dakota and South Columbus Avenue in Medford. This happened after a lengthy crime spree that spread across Washington and Oregon borders. The Caridad family says she and Escobar were living with them just before this all went down last month.
Y fue el día 8 de agosto, alrededor de las 4 o 5 de la tarde, fue cuando aún salió ella de aquí. Supuestamente fue a recoger al novio.
That was the last time her father, Enrique Caridad, saw her. He says the next evening police called to ask about the car his daughter had been driving that was registered in his name. It was found at Bearlung Lake in Yakima with bloodstains on the back seat. Jennifer's clothes were also found in the area, but still no sign of her. The family says they feel police have not been doing enough to locate her and have not been keeping them informed.
Casi nula. No nos dan ningún tipo de información. Nosotros vamos y le pregunto que cómo va el caso, todo esto, y dicen, no te podemos dar más información porque no tenemos nada.
Sunnyside police say they are doing what they can, but they say they are limited because so far there is nothing to indicate that this is a criminal investigation.
We don't know that it's her blood. We don't have lab results back from the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab yet.
Sunnyside Police Commander Scott Bailey says if it turns out that the blood on the back seat is Jennifer's, then this would become a criminal investigation. When were the lab results submitted, and does it usually take this long for lab results like that to come back?
I don't know when they were submitted. I don't have that information in front of me. It's not uncommon for lab results to take anywhere from a month to 6-8 months before they come back.
In the meantime, the family is still waiting for answers. They say they hope Escobar will come forward and say it's the least he can do after they welcomed him into their home. The notices say the eviction is so that the owner can do repairs on the units, but with the market rent sitting at about $300 over the unit's monthly asking price, residents believe the eviction has very little to do with actual repairs.
I believe it's just so that they can raise our rent.
Put a set of sheets in that box with those two little pillows on top.
Susan Sanders and Nancy Carlson are both on fixed incomes. Carlson is 84 and says having to move at this point in her life is much more difficult.
I've been in this apartment for 10 years. I've been in Klamath Falls for 20. I owned my own home before I moved, but I wanted to downsize and live more simply. But now I find out I'm not living that simply because I'm finding all this stuff to pack and move.
She received a 90-day termination notice on December 8, but was in California visiting her granddaughter for the holidays.
It's just a total shock. I lost sleep for 3 or 4 nights.
To top it all off, she got COVID as soon as she got back at the beginning of the year and spent 1 week recovering from it. That left her with roughly 1.5 months to plan her next move.
I was asking for another 30 to 60 days extension to allow me time to either find a place in Klamath or figure out what I was going to do next.
The property manager, Brian Coe, forwarded her a reply from the owner of the property who she's never met. It reads, quote, "I think 90 days is fair, keep it as is." Oregon law requires a 90-day notice for this type of eviction. Sanders says she feels the situation has been handled in a heartless way.
Some of us were here hoping this would be the last place we ever had to be. Now, bad words want to come out of my mouth when I think of the new owners, honestly, because I just don't feel like there's just no empathy, there's no caring.
By law, when terminating a lease because of repairs, the landlord has to give renters who have been there longer than a year 1 month's rent back. Nancy says this was not initially offered to her, but the same day I called the property manager and asked him about it, he called her and told her she didn't have to pay the last month's rent. Jeffrey Tatum told me today that his wife Alyssa was healthy and had no prior medical conditions. After spending a few days in Providence Medical ICU in Medford, she was air flighted to Portland and is currently hooked up to a ventilator. He says just before she had to be rushed to the hospital, she told him to tell others that this is real and urged them to get vaccinated.
She was really just wanting to express that everyone needs to be vaccinated. Because everybody needs to be vaccinated because there's no worse side effect that we could ever imagine besides dying. And she was really scared of that. It was coming to that.
He says, like many others, he and his wife had chosen not to get vaccinated, partly because of misinformation on the vaccine and partly because of fear of the side effects.
It's going to be like a cold. That's what you hear, right? It's just cold and flu symptoms. You'll be fine. Well, it's only like that for people that are vaccinated at this point.
He says as soon as his wife realized she wasn't feeling well, she quarantined from him and their 6-month-old daughter. At first, it was just a light fever, but by day 8, her oxygen levels had tanked to the point that she had to be taken to the hospital.
She was admitted to the ER. Then she was put into ICU and then placed on a ventilator within 4 hours.
He says her family chose to have her flighted to Portland so she could benefit from a respiratory specialist.
She is getting better. She's still on a ventilator. She's not out of the woods by any means.
He says, thankfully he tested negative, but is still in quarantine for a few more days.
I'm out of quarantine on the 13th. And I will be getting vaccinated August 16th.
We're meaningful, people who are no longer here and having photos of them, you can't get that back.
Megan Hayes says one thing she did hope to get back after losing all of her belongings in the Almeda fire was a place to call home. But that reality is becoming more and more uncertain.
You don't have an anchor when something like that happens. You feel like a balloon. So you're kind of floating around looking for a place to land. And then finding out that with the price of materials going up so incredibly high that we probably won't be able to rebuild.
Hayes sits on the Homeowners Association board for Park Rose Community. She owned one of the 18 townhomes in the park. They all burnt down in the fire. The association did have insurance, but it will not cover a full rebuild because of the rising cost of lumber. It's a situation she believes many other fire survivors are also finding themselves in, and wishes those in power would do more to help.
I think lawmakers need to put a cap on rising costs of materials.
State Farm, the insurance provider for the association, sent a statement saying it cannot comment on this particular situation. The statement reads in part, "Our hearts go out to everyone affected by these wildfires." Hayes says the hardest part is knowing she may have to say goodbye to a community of neighbors.
I loved living in this area. It was quiet. We have the creek in the back. It's beautiful. My neighbors were just amazing.
From funds for housing, rental assistance, drought relief, forest management, and firefighting, Markley talked about the items he says will impact his home state the most.
One of the programs that I think is so important is the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program. Think of this as bringing together all the stakeholders to develop a strategy for making the forest more fire resilient through thinning, through mowing, through prescribed burns.
He says the bill would double appropriations for that program, and it would also increase wildland firefighter wages to $15 an hour. I did ask him about how they came up with that number.
With fast foods offering $17, $18 an hour, I'm wondering how those wages were determined to be competitive. Well, Christina, the challenge in the past has been the wages have been far lower than $15. $15 sounded like a significant increase at the time we undertook this.
He adds that a lot of people became firefighters because they are passionate about it, and says the funds will help make the positions more appealing. He also boasted appropriations of $10 million for drought relief in the Klamath Basin.
We've been suffering from year after year of drought that has covered much of the eastern portion of our state and the southern portion of our state, and this is a very big deal how we secure money to address that issue.
Reporting in Medford, Christina Giardinelli, News 10.